So now that we're back into a new week and I'm finishing off the 1 cent small queen, it's time to do a series of videos for that value. As I was working through them, I realized I would need to do more than one video because there's so many different stamps to show. And I don't really think it's productive to have the camera pan onto more than a small area and maybe 10 or 15 stamps at a time. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to do a quick overview of the stamp itself, talk about some of the tips and unique problems that it presents for sorting and collecting. And then I'll do a video on each of the three major groups: the first Ottawas, the mid Montreals and early Montreals, late Montreals, and second Ottawa printings. I think that's probably the most logical way to tackle this. Now, the 1 cent is a unique stamp in that because it's a yellow shade primarily, if you're collecting this stamp used, you need to temper your expectations, at least as it relates to the early printings. In the sense that you're not going to find, except on second Ottawa printings where you can get, lighter CDS cancels, most of the Montreals are canceled with duplex cancels. And unless the duplex that hits the stamp is the CDS portion, it's going to be a fairly heavy cancel with the bars. And yellow doesn't take cancels very well. The color makes it look far more heavy and severe than it is. So I guess what I'm saying is, if you're going to study this value, you should try not to be too put off by the heavy appearance of the cancels, because that's how they're going to be on virtually everything except the cheapest second Ottawa printings at the end. The other thing to note here is, in Unitrade they talk about orange and red-orange shades, and if you're not accustomed to seeing them, you're going to probably tend to classify the red-orange shades as just orange, and a lot of the oranges you're gonna group in with your yellows, because the orange shade on this stamp is not really orange the way you might think of orange if you were looking at it in isolation. It certainly is orange compared with the standard yellow shade, but if you're looking at the stamps by themselves, generally speaking, they look more like an orange yellow. A close comparison would be the 1 cent Admiral stamp from the wet printing in the yellow-orange, which Unitrade calls yellow. But that's probably the closest thing to the orange shade on the 1 cent small queen. And so a lot of novices are going to misclassify that. Likewise, the red-orange is really just a deep, vibrant orange, the way that you might think of that color if you're just viewing it by itself. So as a general rule, we're going to see that the first Ottawa printings are the deep red oranges. The color gets lighter to the point of being yellow-orange and orange in the early Montreal period. That continues into the mid-period with the perf 11.5 by 12, and then the predominant shade becomes yellow or ochre yellow, and it progresses through a series of yellow shades until it gets to be lemon yellow, and very bright lemon yellows before you get into the late Montreal period, where you get predominantly yellow shades and lemon yellow shades. Now, lemon yellow is another color that can be a little misleading on this issue if you're not used to seeing it. Because when you hear the term lemon yellow, you ask yourself, do they mean the outside of the lemon or the inside? And the color in this case is more like the inside of the lemon, more like the juice. It's a pale somewhat greenish, quite vibrant color. It's not the color of lemon rind. That's more just the standard bright yellow that you see on the second Ottawa printings. And I mean, Gibbons lists lemon yellow in both Perf 12 and Perf 11.5 by 12, but Unitrade does not. Though I will say that the lemon yellow shade is found on both of those perfs. So Gibbons is correct. In terms of papers, okay, this is very problematic as well, because a lot of the papers you're going to find look very similar to one another at first glance. I've been, in studying the papers this time around, I've been making extensive use of my 10 power loop, and I'm looking at both the front and the back. And the terminology I'm using on my table is I'm referring to what's called the wire side of the paper, which is the back, and the felt side of the paper, which is the front side that faces the that the printing is done on. In paper making, the felt side refers to the part of the pulp that is coming into contact with felt, and the wire side is the side that's on the wire rack, in which the pulp is spread out when it's wet in order to make the paper. So the felt side in general for all papers usually has a more finished appearance than the wire side does, and that's definitely the case here. The other thing is I want to talk a little bit about paper quality and what that sort of means within the context of this issue. So when most of us think of paper quality, we think in terms of how fine the paper looks, whether the paper is soft and white, and whether it seems brittle and crumbly. If it's very rough versus smooth, that type of thing. And we tend to think rougher is poorer quality, brownish is poorer quality, whiter is higher quality, soft is higher quality. But it's a little bit more complicated than that. Quality of paper, at least in the context of printing, refers to how well the surface will take the ink. So a high quality paper will be one that has a very smooth felt side, and it's semi-porous but not too porous, because what you want when you're printing is you want the ink to adhere to the paper, but you don't want it to soak in too much. You don't want it to bleed. You don't want it to smudge. So, a good quality paper that has a relatively low degree of porosity, just enough for the ink to stick and adhere to the surface and to dry quickly, will be a high quality paper. And so that's why for most of the Montreal period, the high quality paper, they're described as high quality papers because the felt side of the paper typically has a very low porosity. It's quite smooth on the surface, and you could tell that the ink takes to it very well with very minimal bleeding. The design stands out in sharp relief. And you don't see a lot of over-inking or smudges or anything of that nature on the Montreal printings. In contrast, the Ottawa printings and the papers used in the second Ottawa period have a very high degree of porosity. Even when the paper in 1895 or 96 looks white and fine and higher quality certainly than the newsprint, it still is porous in comparison to the paper that was used in the Montreal period. and for that reason, it's not as high quality a paper, although it is much higher than the newsprint paper that was used in the early part of that period. So without further ado, what I'm now going to do, I'll end the video here. That gives you a broad overview of the stamp. And then I'm going to show you the first Ottawa printings and explain the papers there. Then I'll go through the perf 11.5, 11.6, and 11.75 by 12s. Show you the types of paper that are common there, and discuss those a little bit. And then the mid to late Montreal printings with the plate dots, and printings without. And then finally I'll have a video on the second Ottawa printings. So hope you'll learn a lot from this, and this will finally help you to sort definitively your 1 cent stamps once and for all. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.